Hey YouTubers, Tio here with Simplistic Fishing. Hey, today we're going to be talking all about the pre-spawn. We're going to cover everything you need to know to help you catch that fish of a lifetime this spring. We're going to cover rods, the reels, the line, the lures, and the techniques that you're going to need to catch that fish this spring. So stick around, we've got some great content. All right, let's kick this thing off and let's talk about 5 critical things that you should consider when pre-spawn fishing. Number 1 is going to be the water temperature. Your water temperature really needs to be 55 degrees or higher. If you can't find water that's over 55 degrees, that doesn't mean they're not going to be in pre-spawn yet. Yes, you could probably find them pre-spawn in 47, 48 degrees even, possibly. But your best bet is to find water that's 55 degrees or higher. That's going to be where your more active fish are. Number 2 is going to be focus on the areas of the lake that are on the northern side. So don't focus on the southern side of the lake right now. That's going to be the side that warms up a little bit later, so it's going to be a few weeks behind. Focus on the northern part of the lake. That's going to be the part of the lake that's typically shallower. It's protected by the northerly winds. It gets the southerly winds, and therefore it's going to warm up much, much faster. Now, going along with that, that really goes into number 3, and that's focus on the pockets and the coves that are facing north or are protected by the northerly winds. If you can find a long cove that goes straight north, that's your best bet. But a lot of times, especially if you're on these city lakes that we have, we don't have those huge coves and pockets like a lot of people have. So what I would be looking for is pockets that are either totally protected by the wind or pockets where you can fish the bank line that's protected from the northerly wind. So basically the bank line that is facing north. Give that a whirl, and that should increase your chances. Number 4 is going to be stop fishing finesse. This isn't the time to fish finesse. It's time to go out and catch your PB. It's time to catch that big fish. They're very active during pre-spawn, and if you're hitting them when that water temperature is right, they're not really going to be that interested in finesse. They're more interested on feeding up. So get baits that deflect off stuff that are more reaction type baits, and that's going to be your best bet. Now, I'm not saying that in pre-spawn you might hit certain times where the bite gets really, really tough and you have to slow down. And we'll talk about that when we talk about our top 5 lures. But just keep this in mind. Put the shaky head down, put the drop shot down, tie on something that's moving, and you're going to have a lot more fun this pre-spawn. Number 5, and then we're finally done with the 5 critical items for pre-spawn. That's going to be when you find them, you found them. What I mean by that is anchor down, stop. If you caught one, you're more than likely going to catch more. Don't keep going. Actually stop and fish that area thoroughly. More than likely, again, if you found one, there's going to be a lot more there to catch. So now that we've covered the 5 things that are really critical to consider for pre-spawn, let's go ahead and move on and talk about my top 5 Let's get started with baits. My number 1 bait for pre-spawn is definitely going to be the chatterbait. Right? If you can afford the jackhammers, I would definitely go with the jackhammers. But if you can't afford the jackhammers, just the regular chatterbait works as well. I would go with either a white chatterbait, pair that up with a swim bait, like a Kitech or something like that, or go with this, a red chatterbait. I've actually got this one on one of the Lake Fork swim baits. You can kind of see it here. That one actually works pretty well too, really good. In fact, I caught almost a 6-pounder on this one in that last video. This is the actual lure that I caught them on. So really good pre-spawn lure. The keys to these lures, both of them, it doesn't really matter because it's really just color. But the key to these is that you really need to slow down. A lot of people throw the chatterbaits. In fact, I did it. I'd still do it today. I have to teach myself, hey, you got to slow down. Because I'll just throw it out there and it's making that vibrating and I'm just cranking it in. And that's not doing very much good. Yes, you'll catch fish doing that. Because this thing is just flat out amazing, but you're going to catch more fish if you just slow down and let this thing bang and deflect off stuff and make erratic movements. When it starts making those erratic movements, that's usually when you're going to get your bite. So chatterbait is going to be my number 1. My number 2 is going to be a lipless crankbait. Now, I actually picked up 2 lipless crankbaits here because they're my 2 favorites, but I picked 2 different colors because sometimes the colors actually matter, especially in the springtime, but really for the most part in the springtime, sorry, I got these stuck to myself. In the springtime, I'm always going to go with a red color lipless crankbait. This one here is an LV 150. Very nice lipless crankbait. Has a really good knock to it too. Hear that? Nice and loud. So I really like this one. This is really good lipless crankbait, LV 150. Or switching over to a 6-cent bait. This is their, I think it's a Snatch 70 is what it's called. Let's see if it says on the bottom. It doesn't say. I think it's their Snatch 70. But you can see the color here. This is a really good color. And it's got the orange on the bottom as well. So again, kind of sticking to the red, but more of a shad type color, and still have the orange. So I would focus on any type of lipless crankbaits that have some pretty good knock. So you're not going to want to go with the silent ones. Go with the ones with knock, and then go with ones that either have this orange on the bottom or straight up, ouch, this one has orange on the bottom too, or straight up just red, pink, anything like that. That works good too. And in fact, if you're not getting a bite on those two colors, one thing I want you to give a whirl is try a gold one. I don't have one here in the office today to show you, but try a gold one. Sometimes that will work as well. But primarily, I would stick with your red lipless first. And then if that red lipless doesn't work, you're going to go with more of the shad pattern. Now, on the liplesses, it's the same way. You can catch fish if you throw it out there and just reel it in really fast. You're probably going to catch fish that way as well, just because of the vibration and the noise that it makes. But you're going to be a lot more effective if you slow down. If you're fishing the hydrilla, rip it up out of the hydrilla. If you're fishing over rocks, let it hit the rocks. And again, just like we talked about earlier, you're wanting this thing to deflect and make those noises, right? When it makes those noises and it reflects, that's when you get those bites. So slow down with all of these. I'm not saying, go so slow that you get them hung up, but just slow down enough to where you're able to get some sort of reaction out of the lure. You're going to just have a lot more hookups and a lot more, just a better ratio, hookup ratio, just by just getting that deflection and letting them actually come in. All right, so we're done with the lipless. That was number 2. Now we're going to move on to number 3, and this is probably my favorite bait of all times, just because I think I've caught probably more fish on this lure than almost any other lure. Shaky head started to get up above this one, but springtime, this is my number 1 month lure, and that is going to be my spinnerbait. So I didn't have the actual one that I wanted to show you guys in the video today, because in the springtime, you really want this top piece. Actually, I only have 1 blade on this one, but the ones that have 2 blades, they'll have a red blade on the front. Definitely get that one. I think War Eagle makes it. That's a really good one. This one works really good as well, kind of a shad pattern. I've got some pretty big willow blades on here. Those are really good if the water's not too muddy. If the water gets really, really muddy, I'll switch over to a Colorado blade, more like this, with the bigger Colorado blade. And then more of a darker color, like a black color. So these 2 right here would be probably my number 1. My trailer's falling off here. My number 1 spinner baits that I would throw. I believe this is a War Eagle, 1/2 ounce, and I think this is a 3/4 ounce, and I'm not sure what brand it is. But again, I'm just worried about that Colorado blade. I'm looking for more vibration, more movement in the water, especially when it gets darker colored like that. Now, again, on the spinnerbaits, same exact thing. You can throw them out and reel them in and still catch fish. And sometimes you actually have to do that if the fish are suspending for some reason. So that's the beauty of the spinnerbait, is you can reel it slower and go down low and bump off of stuff, bump out of the grass, rip it out of the grass, bump it off the rocks, all that good stuff, bump it off of trees. Or if they're suspended and you know exactly where they're suspended at, you can let that spinnerbait fall and then reel it right through the water column. So this is a very, very effective bait and a very big fish bait as well. So definitely would have one of those tied on come pre-spawn. All right, number 4 is going to be a square bill crankbait. Now, at first I was thinking I'm only going to say a flat-sided square bill, just like this one. But instead of saying that, I can't really say that I always throw the flat-sided square bill. Actually, sometimes, a lot of times, I'll throw this more rounded square bill, just like that. See, it's a little smaller one. I love these types of baits, especially these red ones. The red ones in the spring, of course, you see a little pattern here that I keep saying about the red baits in the spring. But the red ones in the spring are the way to go, especially when they have that orange underbelly. That's really key. If you look at the square bill that I showed you just a minute ago, this is a shallow diving square bill, right? But look at the bottom of it. Oh, that actually doesn't have orange. It has some orange on the side. But see the orange on the side? That's just enough to give me what I need. So this would probably be a little bit clearer water. Might be throwing that. Dirtier water, probably be throwing this, definitely. And again, on both of these, I am actually throwing this into cover. I'm throwing this into stuff that I would normally think I'm going to get hung up in, but I'm not going to get hung up because all you got to do is just throw it out there. And as you're reeling it in, when it hits something, you stop. And then it floats up. And then you reel back down, it hits something, you stop. And then you do that. The key is to not reel it down and you feel it starting to get hung up, so you start speeding up because you think that's just going to make it deflect off. All it's going to do is just drive it into whatever, wood or whatever it is you're driving into. So throw it out there. Make sure it's going down and bumping into stuff. And every time it bumps, pause. Bump, pause. Bump, pause. If you do that, we'll usually hit it right on that pause. Big time key to square bill fishing right there. And the red, again, is going to be your key color. All right, so now moving on to number 5. I struggled with this one. I thought, man, should I do a jerkbait? Because a jerkbait is definitely a reaction bait. I don't have a ton of experience with jerkbaits, but I've been fishing with them over the last year and really, really love them. So I thought maybe a jerkbait. There were all kinds of other things I was thinking, but then I thought, you know what? All I've shown you and all I've talked about is reaction baits, which is really what I want you to focus on, is reaction baits. But there are times, just like this weekend, when Mother Nature throws us a huge curveball and we get some crazy, crazy cold when we were thinking we were getting ready to go into pre-spawn. There are times when you have to slow down. So instead of slowing down finesse style, though, what I want you to do is buy you some beaver baits. Now, on this particular one, I don't have any beaver baits here at the office, but I did have a jig with the beaver bait tied on. So this would probably be my first option. So say it's sunny, it's clear, it's post-frontal, it's horrible conditions, and they're just not reacting to those reactive type baits. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie on a jig similar to this with that beaver style bait. And you can see my beaver style bait right here at the back. This lure actually right here is actually what I caught that 992 out of Hubbard on. So almost a 10-pounder. It was post-spawn. Had it been pre-spawn, I guarantee that thing was over 10 pounds. It was huge, but this was it right here. This was the jig that it bit. And really, when I'm in pre-spawn, I'm either going to throw a jig similar to this, like a football head jig or a flipping jig or something like that, or I might go with a black and blue. So it might be black and blue jig with like a more of a metallic type brighter blue. That tends to work, especially if the water's dirty. But in this case, in fact, even when I caught that one that was almost 10 pounds, the water was just murky, wasn't really dirty. And this is what I was throwing, and man, that was an awesome experience. So definitely I would say beaver style baits is actually going to be my number 5 pick, because you might want to just throw this on a Texas rig. Depends on where you're at and what you're throwing. So try the jig first. If you can get a bite on the jig, stay with the jig. That's going to be your bigger fish. But if you can't get the bite on the jig, take the beaver off and just fish it with a straight Texas rig. I think that'll really help you. All right, so we've talked about the baits. We talked about the 5 critical things. Now it's really time to talk about just the different reel setups. So I want to talk about one key thing that Tom Reddington actually told me at a THSBA tournament here not too long ago. He said, I used to get worried about gear ratios and having the right gear ratio and having the right rod setup and all this crazy stuff, and it really overwhelms you. And I was like, I know it does. As a new fisherman, for me, not being new, but not new compared to Tom, it is. It's very hard to keep up with. So most of my gear ratios are going to be 7-3 to 1, 7-5 to 1. I think I might have one that's 8 to 1. But other than that, everything else is pretty much in the 7 category. So that's really what I'm going to recommend, is just stick with the same gear ratios overall. And if you do that, you're going to have a lot more success, because you're going to know exactly how fast those lures are coming in and that retrieval, and you're going to get more comfortable with it because it's the same thing every time. If I switch off and I go to an 8 to 1 and try to slow down, and then I go to a 6 to 1 and try to speed up, it's totally different feel, right? So try to get the same gear ratios pretty close. Maybe have one that's off a little bit, but overall keep them the same. So on these, I'm pretty much 7-3, 7-5 to 1 gear ratio. I'm also going to throw them on anything from a 7.1 to a 7.4 medium heavy. Depending on the jig, if I go with a jig that's pretty much bigger than a half ounce, so 3/4 ounce or bigger, then I might go with like a 7.7 heavy for that. So that is really my reel setups. The line setups, I would go anywhere from 15 to 20 pounds on fluoro for all of these. The square bill crankbaits, I might actually go down to like a 12-pound fluoro. Maybe even a 10, but I don't have much 10, so probably going to stick with the 12 just because around here we have a lot of cover and things that we fish for. And then if we're fishing hydrilla, so maybe we go over to Lake Fork or something like that, when we're throwing the chatterbaits, I stick with the fluoro, but I'll go with a little bit thicker, maybe a 20-pound fluoro. And then if we're going with the rattle traps, on those, I would tie on braid, so anything from like 30 to 50-pound braid, and just rip that stuff through the grass. I think you'll have some success there on those. So that's my rod, my reel, and my line setup. Let's recap it. All right, so 5 critical things. You're going to focus on the northern ends of the lakes. You're going to focus on pockets that are north facing, protected by the winds. You're going to stop throwing that finesse stuff and stop throwing some moving baits. And when you find them, you found them, you got to stay there, right? All right, so as long as you're focusing on those things, that's going to help you on the pre-spawn. Focus on those lures we talked about, the chatterbaits, the spinnerbaits, the beaver baits, the square bills, and all the other stuff. I think I talked about the lipless crankbait as well. Focus on that stuff. And then really, if they're not in the backs of the pockets yet, really just work your way back, okay? Just keep working your way back. If they're not in the back, they're on the next point. If they're not on that point, they're going to be on the next point. So it's really all about knowing that they're coming into that area, right? They're going into those coves. They're going into those pockets. There's no doubt. It's about finding that highway that's taking them there and finding those pit stops that they're stopping at in order to catch them. And I wish you guys the best of luck this spring. I hope you catch your PB. I hope I catch my PB. Love to have a 10-pounder this year. How about you? If you do, hey, leave me a comment down below. Let me know if this helps you. Also, please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It truly helps us. And if you can, when you subscribe, let us know where you're from. I'm interested to see where all of our new subscribers are coming from. Hey, until next time, tight lines. We'll talk to you soon.